No cell phone, I'm good. Gary, what's up? Sir? Want me to type for you, bro? Hi, Ken. How are you?
Good, you?
Good. All right, we can get started. Today's the first day back, obviously really excited. The one thing I think that's the first thing that jumps out at you, we had position meetings this morning and a walkthrough, which you're allowed to by NCAA rules, is just the youth of this football team, I think, is kind of jumps out at you right from the start. We have 14 seniors on this football team. Only 8 of those guys have ever started in a football game here at the University of Oregon. And then I had to look the number up when I came up here, but we have 43 either true freshmen or redshirted freshmen, so 43 kids who have never set foot on the field of play here. So we're going to be a young football team. We knew that coming in. We lost a great group of kids that graduated last year and really set the tone for how this football program should practice. We've always believed that our preparation is the key to our success. I hope those younger kids were paying attention when those older kids were getting everything done last year, just to kind of figure out that they can learn from them. But it's also an exciting time. I think in college sports, which is different than professional sports, is you don't get to keep your team for an extended period of time. And kids are going to graduate and kids are going to move on. And then our jobs as coaches is to kind of find out who's the next one. And my first year here as an offensive coordinator in 2007, we had a great team offensively. We had Dennis Dixon and Jonathan Stewart. You had Jeff Schwartz, Josh Chergy. You had Garen Strong, Brian Pasinger, Cameron Colvin. We had just a great group. And I remember my good friend Ted Miller saying his only prediction to start the season was that the only thing that he can really predict is that Oregon will not lead the Pac-10 in total offense with 462 yards a game and 38 points. And he was 100% right, because we led it again the next year with 482 yards a game and 41 points. But no one knew who was going to be the next Dennis Dixon. No one knew who was going to be the next Jonathan Stewart, nor did I. So right now we have some holes to fill on the offensive side of the ball, and it starts up front. You lost both Rand and C.E. Kaiser and Jordan Holmes, and who's going to take those 3 guys' spots? That's what camp is about. Who's going to replace Jeff Mail and Drew Davis out wide? Those are some big question marks for us, and we think we got some young kids that have athletic ability, but we won't know until we actually get them out there and see what they can do. And it's the same thing for us defensively. You lost 3 defensive linemen in Brandon Bear and Kenny Rowe and Zach Clark. You lost 2 great inside linebackers in Casey Matthews and Spencer Pasinger. You lose Talmadge Jackson, who was really just kind of the rock out back for us in the secondary. So that's what this is about, and that's what starting camp is about. It's getting ready and seeing what the 2011 team will be different than the 2010 team, just like the 2010 team was different than the 2009 team. I know our coaching staff is excited. Our players are, according to our strength and conditioning coach, had a great summer working out, and now it's time to see what those guys did since we've been away. Last time we saw them was April 30th, and now we're getting ready to go. So our first practice will be this afternoon at 1:15, and we're excited. So with that, we'll open it up to some questions.
Hey, Coach, how's it going?
Hi, Jen.
47 points, averaging last year, 530 total yards. What's the encore? How do you improve this season on amazing stats like that?
We're not really concerned with the statistical part of it, really, because the first step for us is how do you replace Jeff Mail and Drew Davis and some of those key and those 3 offensive linemen. So the first step for us that we're going to really concentrate on as we start here during the preseason camp is where are we up front? And we have some players. Darian Weems has played a lot of football for us. Mark Asper's played a lot of football for us. Carson York has played a lot of football for us. Nick Cody's played some. Ramson Gilpassion has played a little bit for us. But there's some other guys that it's anxious to see where Ronas Grasu fits in. We're anxious to see where Carrington Armstrong fits in. Anxious to see Hamani Stevens, who's been away on a mission. He'll be in the mix. Ryan Clanton is a young man we brought in a year ago that we were fortunate enough to redshirt. So those guys will be thrown in the mix, and it's really trying to find out. We're always going to play 7 or 8 guys up front. Who are those 7 or 8 guys? And it starts up front. And whenever we've been very successful offensively, it's because of those guys. Now, last year, obviously we led the country in scoring. We led the country in total offense. But all 8 of our offensive linemen were returners. There were no new guys that we had to break in, so they had the benefit of experience on their side. And the only thing you don't have the benefit of with that group is I think they're athletic enough, I think they're physical enough, it's just they don't have game experience, and there's no way to manufacture that until we get them into a game. So the statistical part of it, and we've never put goals that we're going to score this many points or have this many yards. It's about, how hard are we going to play and what effort are we going to get out of our players. And if we get the effort that I think these guys are capable of, I think we're going to be okay.
One more real quick follow-up. With that effort, we see the tempo. How might that lack of depth that you've talked about affect your tempo?
We hope it doesn't affect our tempo because that's what we do. It's lack of depth more from an experience standpoint. We still have capable bodies we can put in there. So, we've always felt that the pace that we play at is an advantage to us, and we'll continue to do that. And actually, really, one of our goals is to see if we can play faster than we played last year. So, Ken? Microphone? I can hear him, but...
Go over there real quick. Again, amplify if you could, since I have a hard time hearing the question from here.
Last year, Darren Thomas was a first-time starter. He had not had a lot of action. He played pretty well. How much better can he play, and how big a factor will that be in how you do this year?
Good question. It's a huge factor. And at this point last year, I think the one question mark we had offensively was who was our quarterback going to be, and it was a heated battle all the way up until the first game between him and Nate. And then we made a decision that we were going to go with one, and I want to go with one quarterback. I think when you have two, you don't have one. But for Darren to do what he did last year, to go undefeated during the regular season, was really kind of unheard of. And I'd be lying if I said we knew exactly that that's what we were going to get out of him, is you really weren't sure. He got better and better each week. He did a great job in the springtime, and he's really done, from what I understand, a great job this summer of really growing into that leadership role and being the guy on offense that's getting everybody lined up. If you're going to be young, which we are, there's got to be somebody that they can look to on the field of play that kind of has the answers, and that's the one thing that you have a little bit of confidence in, is that you got the guy who's pulling the trigger. He's got a whole season of experience and took his team all the way to the national championship game. So I think there's some fundamental things that we really spent a lot of time with him last spring, and I know he worked a lot on in the summertime in terms of footwork and the little things that he can get better. But we need for Darren to improve because he doesn't have the benefit and the luxury of having Jeff Mayle and Drew Davis and some of those other guys around him. He may have to shoulder the load a little bit more as we bring those young guys along. So, Rob?
Is everybody here and ready to go? The guys you signed in February, specifically Rashawn Vaughn, and then is there anybody still recovering from a surgery or anything that's not yet full?
No, everybody's here. They've all reported. They're all gone through compliance. The entire class that was signed in February is here and participating, and everybody is full go right now for practice, so they'll all be running around out there.
Coach, you placed a lot of players in the NFL training camps that are going on right now. How much input or how many questions do you get from these NFL scouts and coaches about your players?
We get a lot. It's a very thorough process from the National Football League down. They kind of want to ask everything, and it's more of, I think they'll make their decisions based upon film and their evaluations, but I think a lot of their questions are more of the background things. How do they practice? What are their leadership skills? What do they like off the field? All the things that I think when you turn the tape on, you may not be able to see. And we I think people trust us because we're honest and we tell them the truth. I think some of those teams screwed up because I think a lot more of our players should have been drafted, but I don't know much about football, I guess. So, we went to the national championship game and had one kid drafted, but I will guarantee you that a lot of those guys that went in as undrafted free agents will make an impact at the next level. Just because the one thing that you can't tell sometimes when you turn a tape on is how hard do they practice, how dedicated are they to the game of football, and if you want me to bet on Jeff Mayle or Drew Davis or Brandon Bear, I'll bet they'll make it.
Chip, you mentioned only 8 seniors who have started, but a lot of experience back, a lot of players who played last year, especially on defense, playing so many people. And getting to the championship game, how much should that factor the success of a year ago coming into this year?
Well, we hope a lot. I think we're all byproducts of our experiences. I think the fact that we do play a lot of guys, specifically if you look at the D-line, just for instance, is you lost Kenny and Brandon and Zach. So everybody's like, well, you have to replace 3 starters. But really, they were a group of 9 guys that rotated. So instead of us defensively saying, hey, we need to find 3 new starters, what we really need to find right now is number 7, 8, and 9 in the defensive line rotation, because Ricky Hamuli, Wade Kilakipe, Taylor Hart, Terrell Turner, Deion Jordan, Brandon Hanna have all played a ton of football. We feel pretty good about that group right now. But now who's the 7th, who's the 8th, who's the 9th is really what it is. So sometimes I think when you do look at it and say, oh, my God, we lost these 3 guys. But because of what we do in terms of playing so many guys, and I think it was our rotation ended up being about 25 guys on defense last year, is that even though guys didn't start, they still got quality snaps in every game that we played. And we hope that, that'll be a plus for us, is that developing depth is part of playing depth. I think you can't be afraid to not play guys, especially early. And kids are going to make mistakes, and we understand that. But I think the only way they're going to get better is when you kind of throw them in the deep end and teach them how to swim a little bit. But you just can't keep them on the edge of the pool the whole time and then all of a sudden say, well, we have nobody to go. Now it's your chance to go in a game, and the kid has no experience. Is that, we'll continue to have the same philosophy of rotating, 9 defensive linemen and 6 linebackers and 10 DBs. And eventually that I guess our rotation, to kind of talk like a basketball coach, will kind of flesh itself out.
Talk a bit about Scott Frost and what he's meant to the coaching staff since he's been here in '09.
Scotty came in, when I first took over as head coach, along with Mark Helfrich and Jerry Azanaro, and I think the stability of this coaching staff is really one of the pluses. I've never had to go really interview anybody since I become a head coach, and the fact that all of us are together for our 3rd year. Everybody has a unique personality on our staff, but I think everybody has the common goal of understanding that what the mission is for this football program and how it's supposed to look. And Scott fit in right from day one, just like Mark did and just like Az did, which I think was unique, because you've got some guys that had been here 20 some odd years, and Nick and Don Pelham and Steve Greatwood and Jimmy Radcliffe and whatnot. But the great thing about our staff, I think, is the chemistry of our staff and how well we all get along. And Scott's done a great job. You look at the production that our receivers have kind of flourished under him. I think the toughness that he brings to that position, really it says a lot in terms of how those guys are. And as I told Scott, he's gonna earn his paycheck now, because Jeff and Drew are gone. So how does he bring those young receivers along? But I got a ton of confidence that he's going to get those guys ready to play.
Heading back to the, does it even work?
It's like a psychic thing.
Heading back to the offensive line, can you talk a little bit about the situation at center and if you're concerned about the lack of experience?
Another good question, but I can't be concerned because our center's gone. So, I could stay up nights and worry because Jordan Holmes is not here, but he's not coming back. So, we're going to have to play somebody in our opening game that hasn't taken snaps for us, and that's just the reality of it. And it was the same thing 2 years ago, when Max Unger graduated and then Jordan had to take over for him. That's just the natural process that goes on, and it'll be a battle. I think in the spring it was Carrington Armstrong and Ronas Grasu who were really competing for the job, and now with Amani coming back off his mission, it'll be interesting to see where he is, and he'll get some. He was a center before he left, so he'll get some reps at center, and then we'll try to solidify it much like we do our quarterback position. That may be a decision that will go right up until that first week, and then once we get really into the nuts and bolts of game week against LSU, then we're going to have to figure it out. But whoever's snapping for us in the LSU game, it'll be first time, because we had the luxury of Max Unger for 3 years, and then we had the luxury of Jordan for 3 years. So it's going to be a new guy, and I got confidence in their ability. They just have never played, so you're really not going to know what you get until you put them out there in that opener. So.
Coach, one of the questions for this season is how this young team, as you pointed out, is going to handle all the national attention with what's going on with the investigation. What will you tell them today, as the season starts, about that and how to deal with it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've told them the same thing that I said 2 weeks ago, is that, I think the media around here is the smartest people I've ever been around in my entire life, and if they voted us #1 in the conference and #3 in the country, then they must not think it's a distraction, so we shouldn't let it be a distraction, because I don't think anyone would vote us to be #3 in the country if you guys thought it was a distraction. So that's how we discussed it, and about that was the only thing I ever said about it. So we're getting ready to play LSU.
And then I just wanted to ask you, because since you were at Pac-12 Media Day a couple weeks ago, there was a pretty high-profile national column of a national columnist saying that Chip Kelly had to go. How confident are you, when this is all said and done, that you are still going to be the head coach here?
Well, I hope whoever wrote that, and I didn't read it, isn't our athletic director or our president. So, and I'm very confident in everything that will happen. So, You know, well, one things we run our whole program is we don't run our program based on outside influences, and I don't mean it to be a shot or whatever, but we don't read any of that stuff, so it really doesn't affect our thought process. Our thought process solely now is really how do we have a very, very good practice this afternoon.
Coach, on that note, a lot of fans had so much pride for what you accomplished last year. What would you say to them who maybe are concerned right now of what's going on, waiting for the results of the investigation, and maybe even a little chagrined about what's happened? What would you say to fans that ended on such a high note and are wondering what's going to happen next?
I don't know what's going to happen next, and it's whether our game's going to, you know, how our season's going to pan out or all those other things. I think that's what, no one knows what happens in the future. But as I said 2 weeks ago, is that, you know, the NCAA is in the middle of a process of examining and going through the it. We also asked an outside law firm to come in and take a look at it, and, you know, once that information is available to everybody, we'll make sure that we make it public. So.
Do you like the fact you said you haven't been together since April 30th? Do you like the fact that after this long off season, you can get these guys back together and maybe it's an us versus them type of mentality again? Like last year, kind of, the way you put it together.
We didn't have an us versus them mentality last year, so we have the same mentality all the time. Is we have a vision for what this football program is supposed to be about, and we prepare against that vision, and we go out and compete against that vision every Saturday, and that's how we measure ourselves, and that's what we're concerned with. We're not concerned with any outside influences, whether it be praise or blame. It's all the same to us.
With so many spread offenses now being used, our defense is catching up a little bit. Of course, I know you're very successful, but you spend a lot of time in the summer trying to tweak and come up with different ideas to counterbalance what defenses are now doing? Or is that a fun thing for you? Or?
The X and O part of the game is always fun for us, and I think our staff, you know, that's one of the things that they really excel at, is really how can we be productive, whether it's offensively or defensively. So, you know, that's the fun part of coaching, is the, you know, the X and O part. And I don't think, and I've said this all along, there's not one magic formula to stop what people are doing, and if it was, everybody would do it. You know, it's not do this and you stop this. This game has been, always will be, and will continue to be about players. And when you have players, it's about how well can you get them to execute and then get out of their way and let them make plays. But, you know, if you have a spread offense but you don't have a great running back, then it's going to be very difficult for you. Or if you have a spread offense and, you know, I've looked at teams a couple years ago and you're like, wow, that's the greatest offense in the world, and then that quarterback graduates and they become average again. You know, this game, college football, has always been about the players and always will continue to be about the players. And, you know, we've been fortunate in the 4 years that I've been here is that we've had some really, really good players. And if we can continue to get kids like Darren Thomas, the Michael James, and whoever the next Darren Thomas or the Michael James is, and I think we'll be successful. But it's not a scheme. I think there's so much blown over about the scheme that I think there's too much credit given to that, to be honest with you.
You mentioned LaMichael. Just talk a little about how you can maybe get playing time for LaMichael and Barner, and plus we have C-Strunk, just the depth you have at running back and where you're going to find ways to get those guys on the field.
Well, I would argue with anybody that we don't have depth at running back. We have two players that have played football for us, and LaMichael James and Kenyon Barner, and then after that, there's a lot of inexperience. So who those guys are going to be after Kenyon and LaMichael is really a big question for us, and that's what we need to find out here during camp. But I know our coaching staff is smart enough to get Kenyon and LaMichael in the game at the same time, but we also have to be conscious of that we can't run the two of those guys into the ground, because right now we only have two proven commodities at that position. So we always like the luxury of, is you take LaMichael out of the game and you insert Kenyon into the game, that you haven't missed anything. You know, and there are times where those two guys will play together. They played you know, a fair amount of snaps in the national championship game at the same time, but you can't have LaMichael on the field for 60 snaps and Kenyon on the field for 60 snaps and then expect us to last an entire 12-game season, especially with the schedule that we have. So we'll closely monitor what they have. You know, LaMichael carried a big load when Kenyon got knocked out, you know, in the Washington State game, and we missed him for a couple games. You know, there was a couple 30-carry games. We probably don't want to have him carry the ball that often, but I think the one thing as a coaching staff you're comfortable with is that if he has to, you know he can because of his toughness. But I really think the big question mark in camp is who will be our third running back that emerges through this camp. So.
Chip, have you had a
Hey,
chance
Rob.
to meet with Kiko and Cliff yet? Any clarity on when either one of them might first play?
No, you know, really today's the first time I've got a chance to talk to them. I've talked to both those guys a couple times over the summer just to check in and see how they're doing, and it'll be an ongoing evaluation process to figure out exactly where they are with it. But they'll be back out. You know, first step is to come back with the team and start practicing and doing those things. But there has been no determination by our coaching staff in terms of playing time as we get going towards the fall.
Coach.
In your 2 years, you've had to deal with a lot of off-season turmoil so far. Mike didn't really ever have that during his tenure. What do you attribute that to?
I don't know.
You don't notice it at all?
I didn't say I didn't notice it. I said I don't know what I attribute that to.
You don't even have a guess?
No.
How's your approach changed going into training camps now that it's your third time? Ironed out a few different wrinkles here and there, and obviously you're taking steps up in the level of play. What's going to change this year heading into training camp?
Training camp itself doesn't really change because the players have changed. So it's not like we have the entire group back that we had last year, so hey, we can take a step up. You know, really, we have to spend a lot more time on fundamentals and basic things with this group just because of the youth that we'll have when we start in practice this afternoon. So unlike, you know, maybe a professional team that has an entire offense and entire defense coming back, and then you really talk about expanding the package and trying to do some other things, is that because of the youth and the graduation of that great group of kids that led us to last year's national championship game, you know, we're right back to square one. You know, today we'll start with stance and start and, you know, trying to get kids lined up and what formations and where the X is and where the Z goes and all those other things, because almost every year in this sport, because you don't bring back the same guys, you got to start back at square one. So training camp will be much like it was for the last 2 years in terms of how we do it, because it's all based in fundamentals, and that's really where everything will start for us.
We have time for a couple more questions, and then we've got to go on. Move on. I got this one. Coach, you mentioned stability of the staff, and I was wondering during the off-season what exercise you go through as a staff for self-evaluation, and were there any reassignments or reorganizations within the staff responsibilities this year?
There were no reassignments or moving of that. I think our whole job is in the off season is our evaluation of kind of what we're doing, and each side is kind of does it a little bit differently because it's different things to look at. So the offense handles their self-scout and their research and development. Their defense handles the same thing. But you know, one thing I love about this group is we got a quality group of guys, and it's, you know, I think sometimes people, well, we need to shake it up and let's go have John Neal coach the wide receivers and Scott coach the secondary. Is, you know, that's not us. Is we hired those guys to do a job. They do a great job, and every single one of them is driven to get better every day anyway. So, you know, I really don't have to worry about any of that stuff. It's just about how do we make this whole program better.
I can follow up on your self-scout. You mentioned the interview with Fowler, you know, maybe throwing the ball a little more in the title game in hindsight. Was there anything else that was really revealed, either things you knew about last year's team that really reinforced, or strengths and weaknesses that revealed themselves as you reviewed last season?
Yeah, I don't know how it will pan out this year because the group is different. You know, if I had to play the national championship game again, but I checked, they won't let us do that. We probably should have thrown it a little bit more, looking at Darren's productivity in that game. But those are things that you kind of learn going in. But now Jeff Mail's not back, Drew Davis isn't back. Those guys made some key catches in that game, and we're going to be young. So our decisions in terms of what our MO is going to be this year will really won't play itself out till we get ourselves through camp and then into a couple games and trying to figure out what our strengths and what our weaknesses are, because there's going to be somebody in the next 2 weeks that no one was thinking about that really stepped up, and there may be somebody that I think we probably said, hey, we really think it's time for this kid to step up, and he doesn't, you know. So then you're going to have to throw the variable of an injury in there. All of a sudden somebody's hurt at this position, so now we got to kind of lean a little bit more towards this. So it really, I think in hindsight, talking about that game specifically, I think it's more of just as the play caller, how do you kind of get better in terms of what you're doing. But that doesn't mean that because we didn't throw the ball as much as I wanted to throw the ball in the last game is that we're going to come out and fire it around 70 times on September 3rd. Yeah, the big thing for us, I think, you know, statistically that we want to talk about is turnovers lost. You know, we were at 24. We were second in the country in turnovers gained at 37. I hope our defense can continue to be that type of group that can get the ball turned over and brought back to us. But I think we need to do a better job, especially in the fumbles lost category. You know, we weren't very good at that. Darren did a really good job of managing the game and not throwing a lot of interceptions. I think he threw 9 for the season, but we had 15 fumbles lost, and that's really unacceptable. So I think ball security is really the big emphasis, I think, for us on the offensive side of the ball. And if we can cut down on the amount of turnovers that we have, what we like to call SIW, self-inflicted wounds, then if our defense can produce at the same productivity in terms of taking away the football, we could be that much better.
Coach, you kind of joked a couple weeks ago that the only thing, you know, causing you to miss a little sleep at night right now is LSU. When you
Mm-hmm.
look forward to that first game, Cowboys Stadium, number 3 against number 4, what's going through your head right now about that game?
That they're really good, you know, and when you look at them on film and you look at them on tape, is just how athletic all of them are, you know, and how well they run to the football, you know, and specifically I spend more time watching their defense than their offense, but, you know, how athletic that defense is and how many multiple looks they present to you, and, you know, that's always the one thing that everybody looks at, because you spend so much time on your opener because you know who you're playing last January, so you're spending a ton of time watching that first game and going through all 13 games they played a year ago and studying them and whatnot. And it's just, you know, there'll be as good a football team as we play throughout our entire conference, you know, in that opening game. That, you know, we don't have the luxury of kind of, you know, what people will call a tune-up game to get ready and jump in. But, you know, I think this group of coaches, this group of players are excited about that challenge, and we want to play in games like that. Hopefully kids came to school here because we're going to play in games like that, and we're not going to shy away from it. I know our kids were excited last year, you know, because we got to go to Tennessee, and that was a great experience for us. And, you know, my first year here coaching, we went to Michigan. We've been to Purdue. We've been to Boise. We've been to a lot of really good venues to play a lot of really good teams, and that will continue. And, you know, it's not going to get any better than the group that we're going to play on September 3rd. So it's a challenge, and we're excited about it.
Besides the inexperience at running back, also quarterback, you really don't have anybody
Mhm.
who's taken a snap. And you've seen Brian Bennett in practice. I mean, how's it look? And behind him, what do you have?
Good question. You know, we don't have another quarterback that's taken a snap, you know, with Nate graduated now. Brian moved into the number 2 spot when Nate went down after the Washington game. But we weren't going to put him in at the tail end of any of those other games we played, whether it be Arizona or Oregon State, just to try to get him some snaps. You know, we were hoping we could get through by redshirting him, meaning that Darren would last the season, and we were lucky enough to do that. But, you know, the first time Brian takes a snap in college football will be his first snap in college football out there. So you don't know. You know, a quarterback is like a tea bag. You don't know what you got until you put it in hot water. So we can't manufacture that. You know, when he's out there on the practice field, I got the utmost confidence in Brian, and his knowledge of our offense, his athletic ability, the way he throws the ball is everything you're looking for. But you really won't know what you have until the first time he sets foot on the field. And we hope, you know, early that we can get him some opportunities, but not at the expense of Darren. You know, hopefully there's an opportunity where, you know, we got a lead at some point in time and he can get in there and start to get some snaps and feel comfortable. But if Darren breaks a chin strap or, you know, hurts his pinky, then Brian will be the guy to go in now. And then after him, you know, we have a young freshman that came in, and Marcus Mariota, and we got to see what Marcus is going to do. And there'll be some competition between him and Dustin Haynes to see who our third quarterback is going to be as we move forward. Dustin's a walk-on local kid that's been in the program for a while, has another good knowledge and understanding of what we're doing, but really hasn't taken any snaps at quarterback for us either. So, you know, there is inexperience, you know, behind Darren. And again, there's nothing we can do about that. I just hope Darren stays healthy for a long time, and Brian will get his experience as a mop-up guy as we finish out the season. But, you know, if Darren goes down on the open drive against LSU, then you guys are going to see Brian Bennett. And the first time he plays, first time you see him will be the first time I see him.
Steve, one last question.
Steve, what are you doing here?
I'm not going
I
yet.
thought you were leaving.
2 weeks.
Oh, okay. Hard-working guy. Most people would just take a vacation for 2 weeks.
I kind of am. Next month, you have to certify compliance with the NCAA. Will you self-report any potential violations involving recruiting services?
I have no idea what that question means right now.
You have to fill out a paper certifying compliance with the NCAA yearly.
Uh-huh.
And you have to self-report any violations or potential violations for the previous year. Have you done that yet, or do you plan on doing that for the previous year?
No, we haven't done anything with that. And anything related to recruiting or those things, as I've said before, there's an ongoing look at from the NCAA in terms of what they're reviewing and taking a look at, and we've hired an outside firm. So I'm sure that whatever we have to do from a compliance standpoint, the compliance will tell us what we need to do.
And a football-related question to that. How much time and how much of a concern is there that your staff will have to balance the football stuff with an ongoing investigation in your daily routine?
Our staff is full bore on getting ready to practice this afternoon, so I'm not concerned with that at all.
That's it. Thank you. Michael James is coming up here right now.